Thank you so much, Peter. Sorry to interrupt you so late in the afternoon. I hope you can still survive a few more minutes of talk. I wanted to take this opportunity to speak about 3 of the most successful nations on the planet in the last 10 or 15 years. Indeed, some nations which have been successful also much longer. And it's not China, 3 other nations, starting with Germany. The American magazine Time a few years back was ranking all nations in the world in accordance with their environment performance, trying to get to number 1 and number 180 something. I don't know who was at the bottom. And they said Germany is number 1. Then they added that they said that maybe the situation in the nature is better in some nations like, yes, indeed, my nation, Norway. But that's because the Norwegians have been so lucky. They have a small population in a huge land, so it's not that difficult to take care of it. But then Time added, when it comes to deliberate decisions to take care of the environment, no nation can compete with Germany. And I think they're right. And you are really adding to that now, Joachim, with saying that Germany will host the Global Landscapes Forum, do it in Bonn, and will do it for the next years to come. We will be very happy to partner with you, with C4 of course, but with everyone else in getting the input, the content into this process. But thank you so much for offering to host. It's indeed good news. Let me add that, of course, Germany is also a nation we can all look into with great pleasure in so many other areas. You mentioned the fantastic river of Rhine. That was one of the most polluted rivers on the planet if you go some decades back. Now it's one of the cleanest rivers on the planet. I wouldn't hesitate to drink from the Rhine anytime visiting you in Bonn.
To drink cold.
And what's interesting here is, of course, has Germany become poorer from that? At the time, a lot of people said, if you take care of the environment, it's a huge cost. We cannot afford to do that. When we resolved the issue of the ozone layer, we were also told by some business that the United States of America will go bankrupt if you attack this problem. And when we resolved the issue of the ozone layer, of the acid rain, again we were told by some businesses that we cannot afford to do this. Let's learn from this. Climate is not a cost. Climate is an enormous business opportunity. Germany is much, much, much richer now. Every nation in the world are jealous on German export industries, and one reason why we are jealous on you is that you have been able to turn the economic and environmental transformation of Germany into export products and prosperity. So let's learn from this. Climate, environment are not cost, they are export and business opportunities, and Germany has shown the way in this area. Then turning to another immensely successful nation in the last 5 years, and that's maybe more difficult to comprehend, but that's Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire went through a civil war, 3,000 people died, but have stabilized the politics. They now have the most rapid economic development of any nation in Africa, indeed maybe the most rapid economic development of any nation in the world. But Cote d'Ivoire also have enormous environment problems. I was there a couple of months back and opened and with the Minister of Environment a new national park very close to the capital, Abidjan. Beautiful, fantastic landscapes. But of course there is a lot of poverty in Cote d'Ivoire. A lot of people have been removed because of the war. They need to settle somewhere, and some of these people are encroaching upon the national parks, which means less wildlife, which of course means fewer tourists, because many tourists come to a place like Cote d'Ivoire because they want to see the wildlife, they want to see the great apes, they want to see the elephants and other big animals. So then you have a negative in all directions, even with this enormous economic growth, encroachment upon the national parks, destruction of the wildlife, less tourists, but at the same time a very low productivity of the agriculture, which is driving this development. Because if you cannot feed your family from the farm, Well, what would you do? Well, you will expand the land. That happens everywhere in the world. If productivity is so low, you cannot feed it from this plot. Well, I will try to get some new and bigger plot, and then I may go into the national park, because it's not an easy proposition for the government just to kick people out. So I think what this example shows is how this new approach of looking into the landscapes in the integrated fashion is the right thing to do. Not look separately to forest and to agriculture, not separately to climate and to biodiversity, but see this as one process. If we can invest in more productive agriculture, it's more easy to kick people out of the national parks because they have somewhere else to go where they can make their income. And you cannot just do one of these elements. You need to set a firm policy from the government to make sure that the national parks are surviving. Otherwise, you will not have tourists, you will not benefit economically, and you will destroy the wildlife. But you cannot do that, and again, unless you invest in the agriculture. And the fortunate thing is, of course, that a number of also private sector companies are now coming up ready to invest in the agriculture. Cocoa is by far the most important product in Côte d'Ivoire. They have close to 50% of the global market for cocoa. They're by far the biggest exporter of cocoa in the world. So companies like Mars, the big chocolate producer, take an interest in seeing how they can invest. Yara, the big fertilizer companies, seeing how they can invest. And we can bring together private companies with, of course, the government of Côte d'Ivoire into a holistic landscape policy, which over time will benefit all sectors of the nation. Then moving on to an even bigger picture, which of course is Indonesia. One of the also most successful nations in the world in the last decades. People don't really understand how successful Indonesia is. First time I was visiting Indonesia, most people said, this will be the new Balkans. This will be the nation disintegrating after the Suharto dictatorship into any number of small provinces, fighting each other. At the time, there was civil war in Aceh, there were conflicts in Sulawesi, there were conflicts in the Moluques, you have the separation of East Timor. Basically, had conflicts everywhere in Indonesia, and it was a nation in deep, deep trouble. The last 15 years, it has been completely stabilized. There are no major conflicts anymore. There have been rapid economic development, and has been one of the most democratic nations on the planet. And by the way, with much fewer terrorists than any average European countries, being the biggest Muslim country on the planet. Huge achievements. In the 1970s, the average life expectancy in Indonesia was below 45. Now it's 72 in one long generation. That is an enormous achievement. But of course then comes new challenges, and one of them is the enormous pressure on the forests of Indonesia, which have had a rapid deforestation rate, which is threatening, and which is a huge carbon footprint, of course, on the world, but which also is a threat to some of the most fantastic species on the planet. The orangutan, forest man, 98.5% the same genes as Peter or Jochen or me. I mean, I'm not claiming that you are like the orangutan, but I know I am so close to the orangutan. It's simply just a small part of the DNA which separates us. How can we be the generation which wipe out the orangutans from the world? Orangutans are only two places, in the Indonesian, Malaysian island of Borneo or Kalimantan, and in Sumatra. Nowhere else, cannot live somewhere else. They can live in zoos, but they cannot be exported to any other habitat on the planet. So unless meaning we, the global community, supporting the people and the leadership of Indonesia in protecting the forest of Indonesia, there will not be any more orangutans for future generations on the planet to live with, explore, see the beauty of. Fantastic. If you have an opportunity, go and see them. But of course, by extension, orangutan is the most spectacular animal, but it's also all the butterflies, the insects, the flowers, all the fantastic species of the Indonesian rainforest. But Indonesian government is now more and more doing its part. Indonesian business is more and more doing its part. But unless you can also provide a livelihood for the small-scale farmer in Indonesia, it's hard to protect the forest. Indonesian government need to get its act right, which it's now doing, making the moratorium on the peatlands, which will make it impossible to destroy the peatlands, and making moratoriums on the forest, which makes it impossible to convert the forest. But it will be much easier to do that if at the same time you can invest in the small-scale farmer so that you can feed your family from the land and you can have bigger productivity. That is why UN Environment, with a number of partners, including big banks from Hong Kong, from France, other places, has set up the Tropical Landscapes Investment Facility, which is the aim of bringing the big private sector players in real contact with the small-scale farmers. And that's not easy, because the big banks do not do small programs. They will hardly loan me any money, for sure not a small-scale farmer in Kalimantan. They want big projects. Small-scale farmer need money to transform his or her land, to invest so that the productivity goes up, so that you can feed your family better from the farm over some time, and you need long-term, not short-term money to make that transformation. Many small-scale farmers are doing palm oil. You need investment, and it takes time. So to bring together the big money with the small-scale farmer is the trick here, and that's what we want to achieve with this facility. If successful, I think it will be replicated all over the planet. Just back from Colombia, President Santos and his government said, this is very interesting. If this works in Indonesia, why wouldn't it work in Colombia? We have many of the same issues, small-scale farmers in the Amazon jungle and in the Andes mountains. So I think let's do our utmost to make this a success in Indonesia. Then I think many other parts of the world will want to replicate it. But to conclude, what is new in this process for me as an outsider is that for the first time we are really bringing together the different parts of what we need to do under the banner of landscapes. I started as an activist to protect the rainforest of Amazon and later the rainforest of Indonesia. And at the time, it's not that long time back, but just 5 or 10 years back, we didn't have this broad concept of landscapes. I think that immensely helpful, will make it very much more easy to both protect the forest and the agricultural land and all this together, and protect the biodiversity and the climate with the same means. And what is new is also we are bringing in private sector in a new way. When we started the so-called RED program, I think we did very well, and we, meaning the UN and the governments who were involved in this, we did very well in engaging governments. Government of Brazil, government of Indonesia, they took the lead, but the private sector interest was limited at the time. And UN did not really reach out to the private sector either. All this is now changing. We realized that we need the big private sector, meaning the big banks and the big investors, and we need the small private sector, meaning the farmers on his or her land, and everything in between. So thank you to all of you for making this transformation possible. I think we are now on the right track. It's as with every other climate issue, we have put the planet on the right track. We are moving in the right direction. Remind yourself that last year was the first year in human history we invested more in solar and wind than we invested in oil and coal. We are moving in the right direction on landscapes, on renewables, nearly every area, but we are moving too slow. Train must speed up. Issues are urgent. Finally, to cite one of my favorite politicians of all times, Mahatma Gandhi of India, who set it right for us when he said, and you may recall that Prime Minister Modi decided to ratify the Paris Agreement on Gandhi's birthday. He said to us that we all should emulate the lifestyle of Gandhi. Well, that will be difficult for most of us, but still we may take a lot of inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi. And he said, we should be the change we want to see in this world. You, me, we should be the change we want to see in this world. Thank you so much.